Everything about Showdown and the optimizer is almost identical to the classic slate. Build settings work the same way, team stacks work the same way, even the logic in the player groups works the exact same way. So if you're unfamiliar with any of that, we have tutorials on each one of those categories individually that you can check out, all around or below just 5 minutes long. So super easy to check those out. What we're going to talk about here is the difference between Showdown and the classic slates. And the main difference, really the only difference, is that every player needs to be treated as 2-in-1. So Tyreek Hill, for example, has a flex version of himself and a captain version of himself, and we need to treat those differently. So let's say your approach to this slate is that you want to be under the field on Tyreek Hill, and so maybe you want no more than 25% in the flex. You would have to set that here. And then you'd have to click over to the captain and say, okay, maybe I want no more than 5% Tyreek Hill as captain. You have to do that separately. And if you are this low on Tyreek Hill, maybe another thing you want to say is, okay, I want at least 75% of Jalen Waddle. Well, you could do that by doing the same sort of thing. You can go to min exposure. You can go to both the flex and the captain and put something in from there. Or another easy way you can do it, go to player groups, create a group called Waddle, and say, in 75% of my lineups, I want one of Jalen Waddle, the captain, and Jalen Waddle, the flex. So it's going to accomplish the exact same thing. Obviously, one of them, you're being more specific with how much captain usage and how much flex usage you have for the player. If you don't really care about that, if you want the optimizer to just take him wherever it views he's best utilized, then you can just do it this way with the player groups. But the other thing is we have to be really careful with these player groups about making sure that we're using both captain and flex. So for example, if one of your rules on this slate for yourself is, you know what, I really just don't think that there's a high chance that both Waddle and Hill both play super well, or I just want to benefit from the belief that only one of them is going to have a great game. And so maybe you only want one of them in your lineup, period. Well, how would we do that? We can say Miami Star wide receivers as the name of this group. And notice here I'm in the flex. So if I were to just go Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle here, and I said 100% of lineups, I want between 0 and 1 of these guys, this is not going to accomplish everything that I'm trying to accomplish, because the possibility still would then exist that I'm using one as the flex and the other as the captain. And so if I want to get rid of all of that possibility, if I want to make sure that only one is in my lineup, period, then I have to also click over to captain and add both Hill and Waddle in this section as well. So now with this group, I'm now guaranteeing that I never have both in my lineup, period. But what if this isn't exactly what you want to do? What if you want to get even more specific and say, you know what, I'm okay with both of them if they're in the flex. You know, perhaps that means that Tua is going to be the captain, and certainly then they could both hit. And so instead it's, I want only one of them if that one is the captain. So if Tyreek Hill is the captain, then Waddle is not used as the flex, and vice versa. If Waddle's used as the captain, then no Tyreek Hill in the flex. How would you make that happen? Well, this is also a pretty easy answer. So the first thing that we would do is we would select one as the captain and then use the other as the flex. So this is just now a 2-player group. But then we would have to do the opposite as well in a second group. So now we're going to say Miami Star wide receivers 2. And this is going to be the reverse. So this time it's going to be Waddle as the captain and Tyreek Hill as the flex. And you might notice that here I'm not even using the anchor capability. So technically I'm not even turning this into an if-then statement since I'm not selecting the anchor, but it just so happens that in this case, you don't necessarily need it. So personally, I probably would do it just so that I'm keeping everything as clean as possible, and I'm making sure that the groups are, you know, being understood by the optimizer in the exact same way that I'm saying them in my head. But again, in this scenario, there is no effective difference whether you actually turn that anchor on or not in these player groups. It's going to accomplish the exact same thing. Now, one distinction there, let's say we wanted to add one more guy here. So let's go, let's say Braxton Berrios. If we now do this and we say, you know, between 1 and 2. So in this scenario, now what you're saying is, okay, if Tyreek Hill is the captain, then I only am okay with one more of these receivers. And maybe we'd even say, Jonnu Smith should also be in there as a flex. And, maybe that's enough. Odell Beckham Jr., once he's actually healthy, maybe we'd throw him in there as well. Right. So now what you're saying is if Tyreek Hill is the captain, I don't want any other pass catchers. I could use Mostert. I could use Achane, whatever, but I'm not using any of these other pass catchers. There is a difference here because now if we did this, then you could still get, Tyreek Hill as the flex. But obviously, if you're anchoring Tyreek Hill here as the captain, there is no instance of this rule being followed where Tyreek Hill is possibly being used as a flex. So there is a very, very small difference there. Again, you don't have to use the anchoring when it's as simple as what we were saying earlier. Just, if you're using one in the flex or if you're using one in the captain, then you're not using the other in the flex. It doesn't make a difference whether you click on this anchor or not, but understand exactly what that is doing. Again, when you use the anchor, it turns it into an if-then statement where the anchored player is the if. So if Tyreek Hill, then between 0 and 1, actually this would have to be 1 and 1. I guess it wouldn't because, again, you could technically have 0 of Tyreek Hill. If you had neither of them, then this rule would still be being followed. So that is everything you need to know about Showdown. Really, the only difference is that you have to keep track of both the captain version and the flex version of each player.